Welcome. I am delighted now to have the opportunity, since the World Series has concluded and Frank was at the World Series, and we were actually going to postpone this if we were actually going to postpone this if there was a seventh game, but the good Lord enabled the Dodgers to win on time, and so we have the chance. There you go. There is official proof that Frank was at the game. We have the opportunity now to find out about the other big contest in America, and of course, talking about the NBA. No, I'm talking about the election politics with a superb guide to the field, and hopefully we'll learn something about where we stand and what might happen and what it means. So first of all, Frank, welcome and thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to start by asking you, I saw on the recommendation actually of a couple of the associate rabbis here, Rabbis Guzik and Sherman, I watched The Social Dilemma. And it was a riveting documentary about the way in which social media pushes us further in not only in the direction in which we already are inclined to go, but feeds us news that develops interest that we would not otherwise have had. And I wonder how much of the polarization in this country you attribute as an old hand at politics to social media and those kinds of algorithms that push us, and how much is attributed to other factors. What do you think? Because you've certainly seen it.
The first thing is I'm going to ask a favor. And yes, I was at the Dodger game, so I'm very happy. And I don't want to lose that happiness. And the only way that I could lose that happiness is if your congregation, your followers get mad at me.
Okay.
I know that it is a dangerous thing to speak about politics in a synagogue. Yeah. I know the comments and the situations that have happened, and Rabbi, your sermon about tolerance and understanding that you gave a couple of years ago was brilliant. And I just wish that more congregants from across the LA area, across the country, would hear this. Please, I just did a Zoom call, and it was with USC students. I don't mind telling you the story. I can't be specific, but there's 60 people on the call, about 30 students, 30 adults. And the students were so well behaved and asked really sharp questions and wanted to understand and learn. And the adults were awful.
Really?
They all gave sermons, mini sermons about how horrible one candidate was or the other. And they were so declarative and they were so insulting. And I actually said, don't do this. This is exactly what the problem is in American life, is that we are so quick to judge that we put people around us. So we watch our news to affirm us rather than inform us. So chill out and actually seek to understand rather than seek to influence. And one of the older gentlemen said, I'm well educated, I'm smart, I've lived a life, I have the right to speak ill of a candidate that I don't like. And I thought, by the very fact that you're educated and experienced and are supposed to have some wisdom that comes with age, that you would seek not to set a bad example for these students who are on this call. And I bring you to the first debate because social media did not cause what Trump and Biden did to each other in that first debate. That was the worst example of politics in my entire career. And I've been doing this now for 38 years. They were an embarrassment, both of them. For those of you who want to blame Donald Trump for interrupting Joe Biden 70 times, go for it. He deserves it. For those of you who want to blame Joe Biden for telling the president of the United States to shut up, man, or calling him a clown, he deserves it. They both were horrific. And if your children acted the same way that those two individuals did, you'd ground them. You'd put them in their rooms. You would not let them go out on the weekend. You'd be furious. And even worse, if their junior high school gym teachers behave that way to students, you'd fire them. That's not the fault of social media. That's their own behavior. That said, I think social media is horrific. I think Twitter, which I use a lot, and I encourage you to follow me on Twitter because I try to use it, other than when the Dodgers won. And yes, I went crazy. And Rabbi, if we had confession, you'd have to listen to my now.
Because I absolve you, oh Frank.
I feel better already. I'll do 2 Hail Marys and I'll be.
No, you won't.
But I use Twitter to inform, and I use Twitter to provide a perspective that other people don't necessarily get. And I'm critical of Trump and critical of Biden and supportive of the two of them. And I challenge the news media, and sometimes I back them up. I try to be straightforward. There are times when Twitter does work, when Facebook does provide an ability to connect, an ability to understand and empathize with people, which is so important. But there's so much of social media that is crap. And I would use a much worse word, but I will not do that in this setting. But I feel that way. I just think that social media encourages us to go into our own cocoons, our own silos, and not hear from anyone or anything outside of what we already believe or what we know to be true, even though it's not necessarily true. So I ask the congregation, I ask those listening, don't try to make an excuse. Just don't do it. Make sure that your kids know that there are two sides to everything. Make sure that they know that it is better to learn. I think better to learn than it is to speak. And honestly, Rabbi, it's one of the reasons why I respect you so much is because I've never felt ever proselytized by you. I do hang on every word. And those of you will not know that we've known each other for a while. It's one of the greatest. I'm getting emotional. The rabbi's been very important in my life because he brought me back into confidence in my religion. That I had rabbis when I was younger that completely turned me off to Judaism because I thought they were giving me a political sermon. Rabbi, when you speak of an understanding, you speak of a connection, and it worked with me, and it works with me. And you somehow have found a way that very few people who speak from the pulpit have been able to do, which is you say things that we all see ourselves in without finding those fault lines that we all reject. And so I'm so grateful to that.
I'm very grateful for those words. Thank you. And now they're recorded, so I'm good. You started out in politics as a fashioner and a shaper of people's messages, and became famous for that. That you used words in an effective way, and not that you've ceased to do that, but that over time you've also become a sort of bellwether. You do focus groups and polls and get to understand people well. And I want to ask you about both sides of your career in that. First of all, my impression, and I wonder if you find this to be true, is that politicians use words less effectively on the whole than they did a generation or 2 generations ago. Is that true?
Well, if our current president, and I know this is being recorded, and I know that unlike some shows, yours has a good percentage of Republicans in it. Our current president uses language as horribly as anyone who I've ever seen in politics. And I say this as someone who comes from that political perspective, that if there's a way to divide, he'll find it. If there's a way to antagonize, he'll use it. That this is who he is and what he does. And I understand that it takes a tough man to do a tough job, but I cringe when he does. And he doesn't like me much either. He doesn't use my language. When I sit with him, which is on occasion, he gets pissed at me. He insults me. He brings other people in to ridicule me. I want to be with him because he's the president of the United States. I don't want to be with him because he makes me feel awful when I'm there. And he's mean. Joe Biden, which will surprise all of you who know my background. I've been with Joe Biden 4 times this year. I've been with Donald Trump 0. Joe Biden I've known since 1990 because I taught Bo Biden when Bo was a student at the University of Pennsylvania. And Bo and I connected. It was the first time I had a beard. Bo used to compare me to Pat Caddell, who he did not like. And Bo and I became very friendly. And in fact, in the 2008 campaign, to be completely forthcoming, this will be my, what they call the box where you do the confession.
The confessional, although we don't have one, but that's okay. This will just be your, well, there's a confessional in each morning service, in each Jewish service, but you confess straight to God. So this time you're doing it to us. Go ahead.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, you are representative. So it's as close as I'm going to get. Okay. And I will joke with you all, but you don't, I travel the globe. I travel the country. I've worked in every state. I visit shuls from across the globe whenever I travel. That we are so lucky to have you as our leader. And you hate this when I do it.
I know.
But get used to it.
All right.
Because I've actually seen the difference. Politicians think they're following the right language. And the reason why is because everybody around them, with the possible exception of their spouse, tells them that they're great. Their staffs tell them that they're great. Everyone just says, that was a great speech. It's always a great speech. I wonder how often people come up to you and say, Rabbi, that sermon, B+.
Can I tell you I'll tell you a story about that, actually.
Yes, good.
When I was in high school, my father was a rabbi and a wonderful speaker. When I was in high school once, we were at a Shiva house and I went up to this rabbi. I had read one of his books. And I said to him, I read this book of yours and really liked it. And he said, oh, have you read my other book, such and such? And I said, no. And he said, you should. It's a classic. So I went up to my father and I said, like, how does a person get to the point where they look at you straight in the face and say, read my book, it's a classic? And my father said to me exactly what you just said. He said, every week, a certain percentage of people will come up to you and say, that was a wonderful talk, you changed my life. He said, and unless you really know yourself and have internal standards, at a certain point, you just start to believe them. And I knew that he was saying that about the other rabbi without saying that other rabbi believed them. But it's true with politicians, with public figures in general. It's very easy to believe what people say about you, as opposed to, the people who know you best and who are willing to criticize and your own internal standards. So,
and one of the challenges for me is that I've developed a reputation. And for those of you, in fact, I'd say to you, if you got kids at home, much of what I'm going to say is going to be targeted to your teenage kids, because it's not this cliche of they are the future. It's that this country is in pretty bad shape and we're leaving it to them worse than what we got it. And so they need to be able to understand those areas that they can change. It's like the Serenity Prayer. And I know I keep quoting awful stuff for you, but I really do believe it. I believe we need to know what we can change. We need to know what we can't, and we need to do what we can. We need to be able to speak truth to power. And we need to have the courage of our convictions to say, this is not right. And here's why it's not right. Let's fix it. And here's how we fix it. Your kids need to have the ability to hear that they're not perfect. It bothers me so much that parents teach their kids pride when they have nothing to be prideful of. They haven't done anything yet. I think the greatest mistake right now, and this is getting away from your question, but it matters to me, is humility. We don't teach humility. I'm desperate for you to do a sermon about the difference between pride and humility. Those kids who get killed by cops, almost inevitably, not always, but almost inevitably, are prideful. They're mad that they were pulled over. They think they've been racially profiled. And they do something because of that pride, because they were taught that pride, when they would still be alive today if they were humble. My parents and my parents' friends taught us, no matter what you did, If a cop pulls you over, I don't care if you're completely innocent. They taught us to put your hands on the dashboard and shut up and just listen and say, yes, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and be respectful and to humble yourself in front of them. And that is not too many of these kids get killed because they do exactly the opposite.
And I wonder, this is obviously a very fraught area, and I think you would probably get a lot of pushback on this, at least from some of the people who were killed. Some of the tapes that we have, like on George Floyd, who was literally crying for his mother when they killed him. So I certainly agree with your general critique that humility is no longer a value. Everybody spikes the football. Everybody tells you that they are the greatest, and everybody is preoccupied with their self-worth. And I have actually talked and written about humility as a disappearing virtue. I like C.S. Lewis's definition of it. He said, humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less.
That is really good.
Okay,
guys, I'm hoping that we can get 5 different awesome phrases that you can take with you, that you can write down and put up, like the rabbi's got stuff put up behind him. So you just had number 1.
There's one of them. So, but let me ask you actually about Black Lives Matter and the extent to which you think the left and the progressive left and the protest movements help or hurt Biden in the election, and take that question in any direction you want, because I won't get in trouble for asking questions. You'll only get in trouble for answering them, so I'm safe.
And I can't, if I can show the evidence behind my answers, I can't get in trouble.
Right.
One of the things that I learned, and it was Mike Pence who taught, okay, I'll tell you, you shared that story about your father.
Yep.
I had been very critical of the Republican Party on a Fox News segment. This goes back to 2006. And I said that if they continue to behave this way, they're going to lose control of the House and the Senate, which they did, by the way. And a congressman had called me up from Arizona, and he just ripped me to shreds. There's a 5-minute phone call. He said to me, you should never be allowed in front of our conference. You're paid to be loyal to us. You're disloyal. By the way, I was never paid by the party. All the stuff that I do, when you guys see me, if I'm doing stuff for anybody, I do it for free. I get paid by my corporate clients. I don't get paid by my political clients. So he's accusing me of something that's not true. I'm expected to be accurate and honest and precise when I do my TV appearances. And he wanted me to shade it for the Republicans, and I refused. So he yells at me for 5 minutes, and I hang up. And I'm supposed to do a speech in Florida for the Chamber of Commerce. I'm so devastated by this that I'm almost in tears. I'm walking around. I'm actually in a fog. And Mike Pence, by coincidence, called me up to see what I was seeing. Called me up to ask me what's going to happen. And I explained to him that I'd just been torn apart by this congressman. And I'm just really busted up. And he said to me, do you believe what you said? I said, yes, I do. Do you believe, did you say it to help people understand what's happening out there? I said, yes, I do. He said, were you paid to say this? Do you get any benefit from saying it? I said, no, except I couldn't live with myself if I'm telling a lie. And he said, then you did exactly the right thing. You acknowledge you have nothing to be embarrassed about. You should be proud that you did it. And good for you for having the courage of your convictions and being willing to potentially take heat. I'm proud of you for what you did. And I've owed Mike Pence ever since.
So tell me, progressives and Biden, I'm going to bring you back to the question. Now we know that you will say what you really believe. So what do you think?
I think it's the reason why Joe Biden has not been specific on the Supreme Court. Tell me another issue that's going to have a greater impact on our day-to-day lives than whether he packs the court,
right,
whether he puts 2 justices on that we've not had in 80 years. Because we've had a Supreme Court that's been bigger. We've had a Supreme Court that's been smaller, but not since FDR did anyone talking about packing it. And that was 80 years ago. He won't answer that question because he knows that it'll either hurt him with the center or hurt him with the left. And I think that that's horrible. Tell us the truth. He won't answer whether he's going to get rid of the filibuster or not, which will change policy. Voters have the right to know before the election. They should be told now. Basically, I know what he's doing. He's going to wait till the day before, when so many votes have been cast. More than half of all votes will have been cast. And that's when he's going to make his announcement. So it won't affect the election at all. I get that from a political, from an electoral standpoint, but here's the deal. If you won't come clean with the public before election day, before you cast your vote, then you've not won a mandate. And Rabbi, I believe that this election is not a choice between Biden and Trump. I believe it's a referendum on Donald Trump, that Donald Trump is going to lose. I'm pretty convinced of it.
Really?
And he's very unhappy with me. He called Kevin McCarthy and just complained about me for 10 minutes, just yelled at him. Your pollster friend's an idiot. Your pollster friend's a moron, does not know what he's doing, just ripped into me. Joe Biden is not going to have a mandate. Just as I tell you in all frankness that Donald Trump is going to lose, I'm going to tell you in all frankness that that is not a victory for Joe Biden. It is a loss for Donald Trump. If you're not willing to say what you support, what you believe in, what you're going to do, if you're going to get through it because you're a better human being than the person you're running against, then you do get the moral advantage, but you don't get the political advantage.
Do you think there are so many things now I want to ask you? Do you think it'll be close? Do you think you'll get a large victory? And would you be surprised if you were wrong? Would you be surprised if Trump won?
If I am wrong,
thing?
If I'm wrong, then my profession is done. Because CNN's final election poll has Donald Trump winning by 12%. That's a landslide. If Donald Trump only wins, if Joe Biden only wins by 2 or 3%, then the polling was wrong too.
Mm-hmm.
Some polls are now showing this to be a landslide as the public is coming to the conclusion that it doesn't want 4 more years of what it has. And I know that this is, and we should get into Israel at some point, but not yet, because that's too specific.
We will.
But, and I do want to answer the Black Lives Matter thing, because it's part of my own change, which is I now understand, which I did not before. I would say all lives matter. And that, to my frame of mind, is an appropriate approach. To say Black Lives Matter to me is to be racist, is to see color and to specifically distinguish Black, African American from white, which I believe is wrong.
Can I give you the argue against the counter argument? Here's the
hold on, because you're going to get me in trouble if you do this, because I'm about to tell you that I realize I'm wrong.
Oh, okay.
And if you had jumped in,
no. I got a mask on my face. Go ahead.
Here, but you don't have a Dodger mask on your face, so we got to fight away.
Right.
It is racist if you will not acknowledge that they exist, if you will not acknowledge that they live, that they breathe, that they are deserving of every right and every responsibility and every blessing. And if you won't acknowledge them by acknowledging specifically that Black Lives Matter, then you are not understanding what is going on in that community. Now, I have a problem with this. I am going to mention the issue, but I'm now supportive. I don't think that they do a good job. I don't think that they have got a good plan. But I now realize that by affirming Black Lives Matter, you're actually saying all lives matter, including Black lives. My issue, and this is significant, and I'd like a comment from you actually, is the moment that we become victims, and this is something that Jewish faith has never allowed, the moment that we become victims, we lose our agency. We lose our ability to make a change in our lives. In the Jewish religion, even what happened under Hitler, I am taught that was no excuse for remaining silent. I'm taught with that phrase, those 2 words, never again. And I learned that in Israel, and I learned that in everything, that no matter where it may explain what you do and where you are, but it is not a justification for victimhood, that we have to be responsible, we have to be accountable. And I'm afraid that there are too many people within the Black community that are coming to the conclusion that they can't change their lot in life, that they can't, that they're not on the same playing field, and therefore they won't even try. And we can't do that. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the next generation. The more we expect of people, and I've learned that from my polling, this is not ideological, this is polling now, research, focus groups. The more that we expect and demand from people, the more they will give us. The higher you set the bar, the higher they will climb. And that's my only fear about Black Lives Matter, is that they're saying, we can't do it.
Right.
When there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of examples, millions of examples of people who have achieved so much with life set against them. Your reaction to that?
Well, so I think that it's always a really, you have to believe two things simultaneously to be a success in life, I think. One is you have to recognize that a lot of what you have, good and bad, has nothing to do with you. I live in a building I didn't build. I eat food I didn't grow. I was given genes that I didn't earn. A lot of what my condition is in life.
You're too old to be wearing those jeans.
Right.
With all due respect,
right.
a rabbi in jeans just
I was talking genetics, buddy, that I didn't earn. All those things are true. And so you have to be grateful, and sometimes you're allowed to be upset if you're put in a situation that's bad. And so I don't begrudge people recognizing the discrimination against them, the blessings on the one hand, the difficulties on the other. But it is certainly true, as you say, that if you don't take responsibility for your own situation to the extent that it is possible to do so, then you are condemning yourself to inertia and to failure. And so empowerment, those leaders that preach empowerment, it seems to me do much more for a community, any community, than those leaders that preach victimhood. And by the way, sometimes, unfortunately, some Jews do the same thing, right? Everybody hates us, everybody's against us. And that's manifestly not true, first of all. And second, it makes you into, exactly as you said, a victim instead of an actor. And I'm pleased to say that that is not the dominant voice of the Jewish community, just as you say. And if it were, I think the Jewish community would be in a lot of trouble. So
I will tell you that I get better receptions when I speak at churches than I do in synagogues.
Me too.
The reason I agree to you too.
Of course.
Who's
going to insult the rabbi in a church? I once spent a day at Oral Roberts University. The whole day at Oral Roberts, I spoke to the faculty, I spoke to the administration, I spoke to the student body. I have never received so many blessings in my life. Everywhere I went, bless you, Rabbi. Rabbi, you're a blessing. Bless you. I'm telling you, I was so well treated. Now tell me why you get better.
Because for some reason, and this is partially humorous, but it's based in fact, that when I answer questions in a Jewish audience, and I will fight to the death that what I'm about to say is true, Jewish audiences want to explain to me how they think, and they want me to validate their question. Mm-hmm. In churches, they want to learn from me, and they want to know whether they will validate what I think. It's a completely different directive, which is why a church question to me will take 30 seconds, and a Jewish question in a synagogue will take 2 minutes.
Joe Epstein has this great line. He says, Jews don't listen, they wait.
That's two.
That's number two, right, exactly.
There's your second one.
So how do you see, I mean, we haven't gotten to Israel yet, but I'm curious, I hear a lot from both sides about the anti-Semitism on the other side. That is the far right, the progressive left. The argument, and I'm going to give you the arguments on both sides. The argument on the left is that the right is more violent, that the attacks have been on the right, and that the president empowers the right. tacitly and sometimes not tacitly. The argument on the right is that the left, the anti-Semitism is actually part of the party. It's not a fringe group that the average party member says, oh, they're on the outs, as opposed to being actually part of the, not of the mainstream exactly, but of the party energy. So how do you see those two arguments about each other?
So when I was a kid and I had aligned with the Republican Party, this is before Jesse Helms had been to Israel. I felt very uncomfortable within the GOP. I would not tell people I was Jewish. I would keep it a secret because I thought that they would dislike me. And being so young, I had no reason for them to like me. I had not earned any kind of respect or awareness. So I just had to keep quiet. And I have one other story. But then as I got older, I realized as things changed, Helms goes to Israel and comes back a strong supporter. Ronald Reagan is just backs Israel. George W. Bush is even stronger than Reagan. And arguably, Donald Trump has done more for Israel than any other president. And I know that there are people's heads exploding right now. I feel safe. I feel more appreciated in a synagogue, in a church over Israel. I'm about to say something that's going to blow people's minds up. But I get greater expressions of support for Israel in churches than I do in synagogues. And it really bothers me. And maybe it's because the Jewish community feels comfortable enough, because it's part of who we are, to be able to say, well, you're family. And because you're family, you're fat. You shouldn't wear those clothes. What you just said is stupid. And when you're outside the family, you're much more respectful. I don't give it credit for that. I think that there's just something really critical in our community, critical, hostile, negative, that does concern me. And it gets mean in some occasions. And the fact is, it's the reason why you don't have everybody up on the screen, is that you know that if you put 138 people on the screen at the same time and open up everyone's mics, everybody be shouting at each other, just how it is. That does not happen in a church or in the churches that I've been invited to speak to. It just doesn't. And I know that everyone's got an opinion of the rabbi's sermon, but they won't tell the rabbi. The coolest thing for me, by the way, because I come, 3 times a year? I know I'm not a good Jew, but by the way, the fact they come 3 or 4 times a year is 3 or 4 times more than I came for 25 years.
There you go.
So you got me in there. You're not gonna, I don't know how you're going to react to this, but they will be saying stuff about the sermon. He missed the point there. He just, Rabbi, that was a great sermon. And then they get 10 feet away from you and they go back to bitching again.
Yes.
That is not what happens in the churches that I've been to. It just isn't. But you asked another point, which I now missed. I need to finish Black Lives Matter. We have to, it's not enough to be tolerant anymore. Being tolerant is not even table stakes. We actually have to be affirmative in what we do. I believe that it's not what you say that matters, it's what people hear. And if they hear in their own minds that this is not a free and fair and equal and decent country, doesn't mean that our outcomes are going to be equal, because we're different people. Right. And the fact is, I studied. I worked my ass off. And so I probably achieved more than I should have, but I had good habits to get myself in that position. And I was lucky to have 2 parents that cared about my education. But it does bother me when they turn to me and say, you're privileged. I look at it as I'm average. They're underprivileged, or they are underserved, or they were undersupported. I don't think I'm anything special, good or bad. I think that they haven't had this. I'll agree that they haven't had the same. And it just may mean that they've got to work harder. Well, guess what? If I want to shoot baskets, I got to work harder, because I don't have that talent. I don't have the talents of I don't do the backbreaking work. The Latino community. We have this issue right now in this country. Do we invite people in from Mexico? Well, the fact is, too many Americans won't do that work. And they should. Our families, when they came over from Russia or Hungary, or when they got off the boats from whatever Eastern European country they came from, they took the worst jobs and they were paid crap wages before the minimum wage. And they did it because they needed to feed their families. And we do have people in this country who don't do enough of that. That said, they're human beings, and we treat them, because they're not citizens, we treat them horribly. And some die when they're crossing the border, and some are put into cars and smuggled over here. We have to do better than that. And I never felt this way before, but over the last 9 months, 10 months, since I got sick, I've been re-examining everything that I think. And a lot of these are not traditional Republican points of view, and I'm okay with that. I think we have to do better. I think we have to respect people, do better on human rights, do better on equality. I'm not going to pay reparations. No way, no how. But I think we have to do more in education. I think we have to. And by the way, everything I tell you is what the public thinks. This is what the public wants to do.
I could spend a lot of time, and I know that some of the people who are asking could spend a lot of time on the question of race relations in America. We have some agreements, we have some disagreements, but I want to get to a bunch of other subjects, starting with that question of anti-Semitism on the left and on the right. How does it strike you?
Dangerous. It's dangerous, and it's now they're more willing to articulate it. And by the way, there are people in the Democratic Party who are pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel, and they are now in Congress. It is what it is. And so for you Democrats to not acknowledge it, it exists. And I hear it in the Democratic meetings that I go to. And I see it in the polling, because I've been doing surveys of the Jewish community now for 20 years. And within the Democratic Party, the percentage of people who identify more with the Palestinians than the Israelis has been increasing every single year.
Why?
On the conservative side. Why?
Why?
Because they equate Palestinian suffering with non-white suffering. They equate here we go, discrimination. And by the way, so you don't have to explain what is going on, but this is my challenge. You just saw it, you just witnessed it right there. I knew what the word was, but I did not know how to pronounce it.
Right.
And I actually had to stop and think about it. And that drives me crazy, because I'm the same person I've always been, but the words don't come out. Yeah. It's just very frustrating. And I see the comparison, and the Jewish community's got to do a much better job at outreach, that they should be in Black churches. They should be in Latino, Hispanic churches, and they should be listening, because that divide is going to get worse and worse. There are comments that come out of Black Lives Matter that would frighten all of you on this Zoom call, just as there are people who participated in that rally in Charlottesville where the woman got killed. These are not conservatives. These are white supremacists. We label them conservative because it's convenient for the news media, but they're horrible people. There are too many of them, and they would turn on us if they could.
In your focus groups, what is it that people are most concerned, not just Jews, although obviously what you just talked about is something that I want to return to in a moment, but what is it that the average American, if there is such a creature, is most concerned about come this election?
I have to do Democrat and Republican. There's no way to do the whole thing.
Okay, do Democrat and Republican, because I think for many Jews, exactly what you just talked about is a primary concern: Israel, anti-Semitism. But tell me, Democrat and Republican, what the average concerns are.
The greatest concern for the Republicans is that the economy, which they were loving, which they were benefiting from, most Americans were benefiting from it, that the economy, that economic freedom will not be there for their kids. Mm-hmm. That we're about to see the biggest increase in taxes in American history, that we have to pay for what we've been spending. You can't just run up this huge debt. But the level of fear, and it's all fear-based, over where our economy is going, is the number one concern by far among conservatives. And then those on the left, it's the lack of equality. And it's a combination of equality and opportunity that they feel like our system now actually perpetuates discrimination. And that has become an unjust system. It's why almost as many Democrats would prefer a socialist system to a capitalist system. Republicans, it's still 95 or 98 to 2. But among Democrats, over 40% prefer socialism to capitalism. And it's that issue of inequality, the inability to work hard and play by the rules and still get ahead, that bothers the Democrats. And among all of us combined, we all think that the other side is destroying the country. And we all think that there's so much at stake in this election, not good, but bad. We're not thinking of all the great things that'll happen if the right person wins. We're only thinking about the bad things that'll happen if the wrong person wins. And we have to address that. And I don't know how you're going to do it, because seriously, Rabbi, seriously, your most important sermon of the year is going to take place this weekend. How are you going to reach people? It cannot be done through the thoughts that you send out, because this is not a 2 or 3 minute conversation. You need to reach people this weekend about how to behave on Tuesday night, because half of your congregation is going to be pissed off and angry and afraid, and you're about the only person who they might listen to calm down.
We've actually been having seminars with the parents in the school about how they talk to each other, and also about how they talk to the kids. And I want to take just a second, as long as we have other people on the line, to say not just about, oh, the other people are terrible, that you don't say that in front of the kids, you don't dismiss a whole class of people, but also, if the person you want to win doesn't win, don't start talking about how the country is destroyed in front of your kids. This is their future. Don't tell a 10-year-old, oh, we just ruined our country, and make them think that they have no future. First of all, because it's not true. History is much bigger than any moment, but also because if you want them to go out with the kind of attitude that Frank was talking about before, which is I can change my life and do things, then you have to give them the sense that it is still possible to do things, and not that everything is rack and ruin. So yeah, I worry very much about what will happen. It may not be Tuesday. I mean, who knows? It may not be till Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, next week, next month. But assuming that the election is decided on Tuesday,
it won't be. We're not going to know till Wednesday or Thursday. But
what if Tuesday night Florida goes to Biden?
Oh, then it's over.
So there are some ways in which it could be.
Ohio, I'll give you the 3 states.
Yes.
Florida, Ohio, North Carolina. And they all close by 8 p.m. or earlier. Florida counts its ballots immediately. So Florida's vote will be the people who sent it in by mail, as well as those who voted by machine. Here's my concern about Election Day. But I just realized you need to do 2 of these. You need to split it up into 2 parts. You need to do this weekend before we know, and next weekend after we know. And it's going to take a double shot. This is just like the pandemic. It's just like the COVID shot. Getting a vaccine, one shot will not do it for you. You're going to need 2. So, Rabbi, start figuring out how you're going to get us all on a Zoom call.
Right. We haven't even talked about the pandemic, by the way. And I noticed that when you spoke about what the concerns were for the Democrats and the Republicans, the pandemic was not one of them.
But it is. But the pandemic's number 1 among independents. And in fact, the pandemic, actually, when you add everyone together, the pandemic comes first. But here's the issue. Among Republicans, it comes first because of its destruction of the economy. Among Democrats, it's first because of its destruction of a sense of security and of health. So you've got a completely different viewpoint towards the pandemic. And the problem is we're getting that. And can I pull up a slide right now?
Sure, please.
If I can do it easily, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you what's why I'm so concerned about this. Here we go. This is our overall, and I speak about the press. Overall, the Democrats think the press is doing absolutely fine. And the Republicans think that there's no worse institution in America than the press. And the independents, who used to be closer to the Democrats, have started to trend now closer to the Republicans. So what you think of the press is determined by your party ID. In terms of where you're getting the most information and what that matters to you, it's still the national TV news channels that matter more than anything else. Notice that Donald Trump in his campaign and Joe Biden in his campaign, they're irrelevant. So I don't really care what Trump says or what Biden says, because it doesn't really have an impact on where the public is getting its information. But all of Biden's people, 29% of them get their news from CNN. Now look at that right side. Only 3% of Republicans get their news from CNN. Among Fox viewers, Trump, 42% of Trump voters get their news from Fox. Only 5% of Biden voters get their news from Fox. We are making decisions not to, again, I said this before, but not to inform us, but to affirm us. And that is frightening. Now, here's the number that made me think about it. The U.S. has controlled COVID as much as it could have. If you get your information from Fox News or talk radio, 90% of the population agrees with that statement. But if you get your news from MSNBC, and by the way, Rabbi, I don't know if you know this, but MSNBC actually has more viewers, has more letters in its name than viewers.
But you're on MSNBC.
But I'm on everything now because I want to be on everything now. I want to transcend media. Look at that.
When you're on, I'm sure they have viewers. But go ahead.
97%. No, I'm the reason why they created the remote. That people don't even want to spend the effort to get up to turn me off. They just want to be able to do it. Just click that way. 97% of those who get their news from the Washington Times, New York Times, NPR, CNN, 97% think we haven't done as much. So here's an issue that we are being informed not by the presidential candidates, but by the media. If we watch one set of media, we've done everything we can. If we watch the other set of media, we haven't done anything. That's the problem right now. And that is why everything is so poisonous. You began about asking me about social media. I'd say to you that traditional media is destroying this country. Both are.
That's, by the way, that is a point of view, traditional media that that it's more destructive than social media that I think I haven't heard expressed as often. It does seem as though when you say it's not the presidential candidates, it's the media that is dividing, it does seem like there is to some extent a certain collusion. It's not like the candidate will say something and then their own media will rush out to contradict or change it. I mean, if you read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, you get very different accounts of almost identical happenings.
Which is a problem.
Yeah.
And I was on Fox. It's happened to me twice in the last couple of weeks where I was on. Neil Cavuto, Donald Trump was speaking, and Neil Cavuto called him out.
Yeah.
And Brett Baer called him out on the same show that I was on. And they've backed me when I've called out the president. That's not happened on CNN. That's not happened on MSNBC. That they call out Trump and they never call out those who challenge him.
So what do you expect to happen post-election?
Okay, I'm going to do this again because I want to show you. And by the way, Trump deserves it. Trump, I've never seen anyone treat the press the way that he treats the press. That he insults them. He's rude to them. He says they're rude to him, and they are. But my parents would say, if everyone's jumping off a bridge, that doesn't give you the rights or you've got the intelligence not to do it. He created this divisive, polarized environment. He never gets a break. And I watch these news programs that begin the show by saying, in a new low for the White House, or some sort of phrase that already turns you against what's being reported. Let the news speak for itself. Donald Trump had some very shocking words today. Let's listen. Play it. And then let the audience decide whether or not it works. That's not what any of them do. And I made this case. There's one of these networks who I work for. Won't tell you which one. And I was making this presentation, and I said, you got to stop biasing the audience. They see it, and it pisses them off, and you're not being as credible as you could be. And I had several producers just start yelling at me, saying, we don't do that. That's old stuff. That's other networks. That's not us. And they tried to embarrass me. And I said, I'll give you one shot I did this. I'll give you one shot to take that back. No. You're insulting us. We don't do it. I says, okay. And then popped in a DVD with all sorts of segments that began with trashing Donald Trump. They don't even know when they're doing it. It's so commonplace that they don't even know, they don't even realize that they're starting off this way. So that's what my issue with the media.
What's going to happen when the election is over and one or another side is disappointed? Like, let's say the election goes the way you say it's going to. Let's say Biden wins. What's the reaction going to be on the street? What's the reaction going to be in the country?
Okay, the first thing is that Biden's people are all voting by absentee, by mail, and Trump's people are voting at the election at the polling place. So in a lot of states, they don't start to count the ballots, actually count it. They will register the ballots, but they don't count it until 2 or 3 days before the election. In some states, they don't even start. Pennsylvania doesn't even start counting the mail-in ballots until election day itself. There's no way they can get through it. We got all-time records in mail-in ballots, so they can't get through it. So on election night, when they start to report the results, Donald Trump is going to look like he won, even though he did it, because the first votes counted are the votes from the machines. And then over time, as the mail-in ballots come in, Biden will get closer, 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 and then I believe he passes him. That's number one. Here's number two. Among Biden voters, 2/3 think that Joe Biden's going to win, even though he's up by 9 points in national polls. Donald Trump, 81% of Trump voters think he's going to win, even though he's down 9 points in the polls. So, Rabbi, we've got a completely different system of when the votes will be counted. And we have the problem of people believing that their candidate's going to win. So what does that mean? When Donald Trump gets those early votes, the Trump people are going to say, you see, the polls are wrong. And justice has been done. And the Biden people are going to think, my God, they stole the election. Then 72 hours later, when all the Biden votes come in, Biden's going to say justice has been done, and the Trump people are going to think that the election was stolen. But I got more for you. In terms of the election and how it's being waged, the Democrats think the problem with the voter system is voter suppression, that people who should have the right to vote aren't being allowed to. The Republicans, in almost a mirror image, think that it's voter fraud, that there are votes being cast that aren't real votes, that this should not be happening. So we can't even agree on the same election system. And one more. And this is the one that should frighten you. And maybe I shouldn't tell this with kids watching. But 1/3 of Americans do not have confidence that the votes of the country will be counted correctly and fairly. And 1 out of 4 don't have confidence that their own vote will be counted correctly and fairly. This is a nightmare. There's a lot of words that are used to describe this, which I will not. Right. But this is a problem. I do not think there'll be voter unrest. I think there'll be enough patience. But I think that this is going to give people a sense that our electoral system is totally broken. And there's a certain Democratic United States senator that I've offered to, and he's accepted, that we're going to work together on fixing the election system immediately to give people more confidence.
And does that include keeping or changing or eliminating the electoral college in your view?
It does not include changing the electoral college. We're not making constitutional changes. We're making systematic changes.
You think we should change the electoral college if we could?
I can give you a really good argument on both sides. If we change the electoral college, right now, Trump is going to Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Minnesota, Wisconsin. He will not be going to those states. If the electoral college has changed, he'd only be going to New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and maybe Houston. I don't want that. I don't want them just going to the population centers. There's a reason under the current system to go to New Hampshire, to go to Nevada. These are not big states. To actually campaign in Maine, to go to Omaha. If we lose the electoral college, they'll never see a presidential candidate ever again.
Right.
That said, there's something wrong with our system when you can actually win the election by 2 million votes, by 2.9 million votes, and not become president of the United States. That's a pretty big number. But overall, in balance, I'm against changing it. But I get the frustration. If Trump were to win this time and not win the popular vote, I think that there would be a popular movement to change it.
I want to ask you two questions from the Zoom before I ask a couple of final questions. One is, do you think that there are closeted Trump voters who answer the pollsters unfaithfully?
I believe there are closeted Trump voters that do not answer the pollsters. And in fact, that was a problem in 2016. It was not that people were lying to the exit pollsters because they got the Senate races wrong also. If they were lying about Trump, they would have been accurate in the Senate races. But those states where they projected that Hillary Clinton was going to win by 8 or 9 points, and in fact Trump won, they got the Senate races just as wrong. I think there's about 2% of Americans who are voting for Donald Trump and won't participate in an exit poll. And so that's the problem. So they're not lying.
Do you think that the pollsters have corrected effectively for the mistakes they made in the Clinton campaign?
I think that they're prepared for it. I think that they're being much more careful, that they're looking at their samples. I also know that another reason why they got the Clinton campaign wrong is because they were assuming a turnout at 2008 levels. So you'd have a very large urban turnout, which backed Barack Obama. And in 2016, those people did not vote for Hillary Clinton. I think they're aware of that now, and they're trying to be more careful. I wouldn't be surprised if the polling got it wrong by 2% or even as high as 3%. That's it. If Joe Biden is up by more than 3% on election, by the way, nationwide, he's going to do 2.5% better in the country overall than he will in those marginal states. So if Biden's winning by, let's say, 8%, he'll be winning the swing states by 5.5%. And assuming that we've got a 2 or 2.5% non-participation bias, he's still up by 3%. That wins him the election. Joe Biden would have to be closer than 5% for me to say that Donald Trump has a real shot at this. And at this point, nobody has him at 5% up, 5% down.
Do you think that there's any chance over the next 4 years that this will get better, the divide in the country?
I have faith in Joe Biden to attempt to address the divide. But I'm going to give you, just as you give out homework assignments on occasion, I want to give out one homework assignment. It's only 5 minutes long. And I know what you're gonna have seen this. It's Bobby Kennedy's speech that he gave in Indianapolis when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Bobby Kennedy spoke for 5, maybe 6 minutes. That's it. It's the greatest speech I've ever seen a politician give. He gave it straight without notes. He quoted from the ancient Greeks. He talked about the hate, but that there's more love in this country than there is hate. And Joe Biden is pretty close to that in his presentation. Joe Biden will not accept the divide that an AOC would promote. He is a consensus politician. He's a multilateralist in a global sense. So he wants to negotiate. He'll bring us back into the climate treaties. He'll make us a much more collaborative participant in NATO and the United Nations. He works together. And so I think that he It's one reason to support him. I'm not saying that I do, but I think that one of the greatest cases for Biden is the fact that this division will become significantly less if he's elected. By the way, I'm sure there are Republicans that you've got who are watching right now and listening right now that are going, what the hell? And then there have been Democrats who've been mad at me in my description of Black Lives Matter. I feel like I'm a citizen without a country. I feel like I've got no party. That Republicans too often want to call me a traitor or a rhino, and Democrats too often won't even acknowledge me because they don't like where I've been or what I've done over the last 25 years. So I feel homeless in a political sense. And the only reason why I don't feel homeless in a social sense is because I have a nice home.
So here's the third line of the night that we can take home. It's from the philosopher Theodore Adorno. He said, the highest form of morality is not to feel at home at home. That is, in other words, to be a little bit uncomfortable even in your own home, that's a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because the people who are entirely comfortable are the people whose ideology is completely homogenous and they agree with everything and everybody agrees with them. And that is actually part of the I think the biggest question, and I don't want to keep you much longer.
Hold on. Can I throw one, because this is relevant here?
Absolutely.
The undecided voters, I was doing these focus groups that aired on a number of different networks, and you can get them. They're on the LA Times website. We're doing the next one this Sunday at 3 p.m. Go on the LA Times website, and you'll see people who changed their minds from 2016. Mm-hmm. One of my undecided voters was the last comment of the evening. This is 2 focus groups ago, and he says to us on this session, we're getting yelled at right now by the media and by the pundits, saying, how can we be undecided? We have to be morons. We have to be low information voters to be undecided. And he said, I resent that. I appreciate what Donald Trump has done, but I don't like him as a person at all. I appreciate what Joe Biden has accomplished, but I don't trust him because he's not telling us what he's really going to do. I'd like to think that this is what we should be doing. Instead of going all in for Trump or all in for Biden, us undecided voters see something good in both of them and something bad in both of them. That we are the voters that should be respected, not ridiculed. And I thought that was very fair.
So this man is an exception to the question that I'm about to ask you, which is that my impression is part of the reason that the country is so polarized is it has become not just about losing an argument, but betraying your friends. That is, each group has a group that believes all the same things they do. And if you make any kind of concession, what happens is exactly what has happened to you, which is people get furious at you. And they say, how can you, as a Republican, say this about the president or about this Republican or that Republican idea? And that's what makes coming to consensus so hard, is that the most significant thing about people's lives now is politics, because we don't have a common culture. Nobody reads the same books. Nobody watches the same movies. Nobody has the same upbringing. We don't have a common culture. The only thing that everybody seems to have in common is politics. So we've become these political camps that are baked in and angry at each other and don't want to be betraying their own groups. Does that jive with what you've seen?
Not only does it jive with it, but I've been contemplating that for this entire campaign. And I'll tell you that the single greatest liberating thought for me, well, the greatest is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That's number one. But I knew that.
Now that's number 4.
Oh, okay. Well, then I got a 5th one, which is the greatest liberating factor is the joy of admitting I was wrong. I love doing that. In every class I teach now, I begin the class by saying, here's a strategy, and I go into what I did, why I misinterpreted it, or why I got it wrong. And instead of building a case for why I'm an idiot, the students find that if I'm willing to admit I made mistakes, they're going to be willing that they made mistakes. And once again, it goes back to humility. I have learned so much more by getting it wrong than I have by getting it right. And I wish that we would somehow teach that to young people, that you will never feel better. And that's how I realized that there is something about confession. I know we do it to God and not to.
But someone asked this question, and I think that it's on a lot of voters' minds. I know that it is. And so I will make this the next to last question. The last question will just be any summary words you want to say. Are you concerned about Biden's cognitive ability? And if so, how do you feel about Kamala Harris as a president?
I need to be not so judgmental towards her. It bothered me when Stephen Colbert asked her a very simple question. So this is my homework assignment number 2. Stephen Colbert, Kamala Harris. It was a debate. Colbert gave her credit for taking down Joe Biden. And how did you feel when you just hit him and his teeth fell out on the canvas? He's giving her credit for asking a really tough question. And she starts saying, it's a debate, ha ha ha, and she's laughing, fake laughter. She says it's a debate 8 times in 1 minute. I feel exactly the opposite. In a debate where all these people are watching, you're put to the test. This is what you're supposed to really believe. That you say whatever you say in an ad because it's not significant. It's only 30 seconds long. But in a debate, you tell the truth. And the fact that she dismisses her criticism of Biden by just saying it's a debate, I thought that was horrible. We need civility, we need decency, we need civics, but the most important thing we need right now is integrity.
Do you think Biden is...
He's not the same man. I don't like playing that because my mom eventually died of dementia or Alzheimer's or one of those. And I know that when she started to realize that she was sick, the damage that caused her emotionally, how she was so upset and it lasted about a month. And she realized that she was not the same person. And she was in such mental anguish over that. And so I really dislike it when Republicans accuse him of that. But Rabbi, he's not the same man he was. I've listened to how he pronounced his words and how he got through the debate. I've seen the speeches. This is not someone who's tired. This is someone who's older. And I've not figured out a way to have this conversation and not alienate people. Right. So all I will say is that the Joe Biden that you may have really loved in 2008 and respected deeply in 2012, he's still a good person. He's a great person, but he's not as sharp as he was. And it does take someone of complete, and right now, everyone's screaming about Trump. But if you're voting for Joe Biden, just be prepared because you're also voting for Kamala Harris.
And finally, any words of wisdom or advice for everybody who's watching?
Yes. And I know you said don't, and it's hard for me to answer it now because of the comment that you made about your kids seeing and hearing things where they won't have opportunity. So I'm going through the very thing that you want us to do. I'm going through this. I'm going through my head trying to figure out how do I say this.
Talking to adults, so it's okay. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, but I wanted kids to be on the call. I'm hoping that there's some kids who are sitting at the screen watching this. It's the golden rule. Do unto others what you would have them do unto you. If you want people to listen to you, listen to them. If you want your opinions to be respected, respect theirs. If you want to be fully informed, then get your news from multiple sources that don't necessarily confirm what you already know. Actively seek out people whom you disagree with to create relationships that will make your life much more enriching, much more fulfilled. Seek to be around people who don't confirm you, but do respect you. I think that we've created these cocoons. 81% of Americans now have lost a friend because of the elections. That's hideous. And I'm happy to say that I haven't, even though I'm right in the eye of the storm. Go to shul. Have the rabbi tell you how best to behave. Rabbi, take an active role over the next 10 days in how they can express their opposition to what is happening, how they can disagree without being disagreeable. I think that I think we can get through this. I really do. But I don't think it's going to be easy. And I know that on election night, people are going to get whiplashed. If you're a Biden voter, be patient, because eventually your numbers will come in. If you're a Trump voter, don't assume that everyone supports Donald Trump and the pollsters are wrong, because after 3 days, you'll see that things have changed. And for everyone here, just remember that your kids are watching and they're coming to their points of view based on what you say and what you do. Be a great role model for them. Show them that there is a correct, or at least a better path, and don't fall into the trap of being I don't know what the word is. Be a good American, not a great American. Be a good American by being a good person.
Beautiful closing words. Thank you so much, Frank, for being with us. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night and stay well, and let's hope there's peace.